much water in the summer that's overtopped the reservoirs.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we was quite low over the winter with the last year we were very low over the winter. This year we've gone from flood to drought. Then we were worrying. Now it looks like we're going back to flood. Quite low over the winter with the last year we were very low over the winter. This year we've gone from flood to drought. Then we were worrying. Now.
Oh, you've gone quiet. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, Paul. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're still there. Right. Sorry. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's I think it's because we've just had these blocks of wet and then a block of dry, haven't we? And it seems to be, rather than steady rainfall, it's just kind of all or nothing. And I think that sort of March, April, May, we had more rain Tuesday than we'd had in the whole of March, April, and May put together.
Yeah.
So
we had this at 2011 when we dewatered Chasewater for engineering works, and it was said that it would take 4 years to refill.
Yeah.
I think 2011, that summer, filled up in 4 months.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I've heard that with climate change, as the differences between the North Pole and the equator get more even, so as the world warms and the equator warms, that less of the difference between the temperatures weakens the jet stream, so it gets into a bigger loop and gets stuck.
Yeah. The problem with it, the problem with climate change research, is that it's so early stage that you could almost then find another study that's doing exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
But that says, because there's some stuff out there that says the jet will get stronger.
Yeah.
The implications of a jet stream getting stronger is that you don't get the loops.
Yeah.
So the jet gets stronger and blows through. But you're quite right. There's other studies that have said that with the cooling of the poles, you will get less of this temperature change. But as well as that, there'll be more heat coming out of this sea that then warms the equator further. Yeah. So you kind of one balances off the other.
Yeah.
You know, so your temperature difference is less. So a lot of it, the problem with climate change research is there is so much that we just still don't know, you know. And this is one of the problems of what do you do about it and how do you go about mitigating it, because you can't pick out an individual event as being responsible for, you know, as an impact of climate change. And I think that's one of the major problems. I mean, what's going to be fascinating is to see what's happened to temperatures while we were shut down and while industry was closed, because obviously the CO2 wasn't going up. Yeah. So the CO2 numbers should have dropped across the Northern Hemisphere. Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see what happens to temperature as a result. And of course, we didn't have the pollution either. So it should, the theory is that, remember 9/11 and the global temperature rose by 2 degrees when aircraft were grounded. So we should have seen a similar effect over a long period of time. It'll be really interesting when the data comes out. To me, this lockdown probably will be the biggest test of accuracy of climate change models. Yeah. You know, because there's so much data you've got for so many regions of the earth, and you can suddenly say, oh, well, there is something. What if we did switch off industry? We've never been able to do that before.
Yeah, but the other angle I've heard of is that it takes about 100 years for you to see any impact of what we do today.
Yeah, it's that's to do with the amount of CO2 that's in the atmosphere stays up there for 100 years. Yeah, I think the impact, if it happens, I reckon the impact is shorter term than that. I think you're looking over a 5 to 20 year period. Although because you've put the CO2 up there, the warming will continue for sort of 100 years. But I think that 5 year to 20 year window is probably the biggest one. I think that's where we'll see most of the impact from it. It's going to be fascinating. It's going to be fascinating to see what research comes out of this. I sound like the eternal skeptic with the research. I'm not really. I kind of think that the amount of research that's being done is good. My problem with it has been for years and years and years is it all seems weighted in one direction.
Yeah.
because that's where the money's going.
Yeah.
You know, rather than let's just play a game here and let's just say, what if we're completely wrong? Let's super test it, and let's just see what happens if this is completely the reverse.
Yeah.
Because to me, that will provide the answers that would prove that human-induced climate change is real, and that will give you a level of impact. But that opposite side research just isn't being done. You know, I suppose it's just the scientist in me that wants it to be better science.
Yeah.
Than it is. You know, and the trouble is, of course, most of us won't be around to witness the impacts.
Well, I would say that we're witnessing the impacts now. It certainly, it wasn't last year the warmest year ever, or this May was the warmest May ever, or you know, in terms of ecology, species that you know, I read about as in books of, like, you know, you'll never see these unless you're down in Cornwall, are now well past us. You know, heading north, and and the weather does, you know, the warmer temperatures holds more water, so that's why the storm we had yesterday, the raindrops, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, the stuff we had yesterday was kind of playing to the Midwest, really stuff.
Yeah.
You know, that's the sort of stuff that you'd see there. I mean, but you must see it as well. That, I mean, I'm just being a bit of a devil's advocate here as well. You must,
like it. You have to be.
You must see it as well, that what we're witnessing is what we see as a human lifetime or a human career.
Yeah.
So for me, that's probably what, I'm 50 now, coming up to 50. So that's probably 35 years worth, or perhaps 40 years, because I was a bit of a weather nerd. I mean, a bit like you're a wildlife nerd. You know, it's, for me, it's sort of a 40-year window of experiencing stuff, which takes us from the very cold winters of the early 80s, which of course we were going to go into an ice age. That was the initial climate change.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
All the way through to what we've got now, but that's still an incredibly short window.
Yeah.
So I was reading in Weather Magazine today, they've done a write-up on the drought of the Middle Ages, and there were droughts in the Middle Ages that were lasting 2 and 3 years across Northern Europe and caused massive amounts of disruption. Yeah. So, you know, I kind of think, okay, how much of this is because we're witnessing it through a human lifetime, which is incredibly short?
Yeah.
You know, do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And is it the same with you with wildlife, witnessing stuff coming north that haven't been there before because, yes, temperatures are warmer? So do you see what I mean?
Yeah, and a lot of those species have been there before when the temperatures were warmer in a certain period. But I guess the worry is that I understand how important the atmosphere is, and the atmosphere is driven by, you know, vegetation and a decent climate, and we're stripping the planet of vegetation, and we're putting all the stored carbon that was locked away under the ground that served a purpose back up into the air. So to me, it's about stopping meteorites obliterating this planet.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think as well, it's kind of, I think that's more the point for me, is let's not worry about up there, because there's not a lot we can do about what actually goes on. What we can do is limit the sharp variations by what we do down here, and by the disruption that we cause down here, and destruction of natural resources and what we do. Because almost I think if you stop doing that and think about what you do, that up there will sort itself out, because it always does.
Well, yeah, and look how quick the hole from the CFC, you know, in the CFCs in the 90s, you know, and the damage, and how quickly that was reversed and repaired. And
absolutely. And you've only got to look what it does with volcanoes. You know, you have a huge volcano goes off.
Oh yeah.
That you would look at, and you look at the was it Mount Pinatubo, was it? It went off in the 1820s. And you look at the amount of ash that put up there, and those were the years without summer. Yet the atmosphere sorted itself out. Now, that was a natural disaster, admittedly, but you're looking at those levels of pollution that we're putting up there as well, which are similar sort of levels. And the atmosphere sorted itself out. So I definitely think that if we look after ourselves down here and sort out the mess that we create, the atmosphere usually will correct itself. And I think that's where we very much need to focus. I think what the work that you do is mega important, so important to for climatologists and for meteorologists like me, because that's the starting point of the change from what I can see. You know, you're not going to turn factories off.
No.
Are you? What you can do is you can think very carefully about where you're putting them, what's going through them, the impact of the wildlife around. Let's just think these problems through. You know, and in this country, I mean, we're sitting around the village here now with a lot of building work going on again, where huge, vast areas of fields are being ripped up, houses put on there that still don't have solar panels on the roof.
Oh yeah,
you know, still box standard houses. The wildlife has been disturbed. We've now got owls coming into our garden, badgers further into the village than they ever have been. So in a very microscopic way, we've just wrecked a whole ecosystem. You know, to stick on a few £500,000 houses.
Totally.
And to me, that's without thinking, okay, well, what impact are we having? And then the same people will say, oh, I'm terribly worried about climate change.
It's box ticking, and unfortunately, the environment's not a box to be ticked.
Dead right. It's something to give lip service to, I think.
You're totally right. It's some of the developments look like them straight out of the 80s.
Oh God, yeah.
And yet we're meant to be, like you say, we could, when the green belt's going, we could be like putting the, you know, the futuristic housing in the future, and like you say, sustainable. Now, I even love in the past, in the war, when they used to hide the plane bunkers, and they used to turf them. Perfect, brilliant development. You know, these big Amazon warehouses could be under turf.
Yeah, absolutely. And
now it's the countryside then.
And to me, it seems to be across all political parties. It seems, doesn't matter what they are, it just seems to be that's the same view pervades, is that, okay, we like the idea of it and we'll do what we can with the environment and we'll talk about the environment, but when it comes to it, actually we don't make any changes. You know, and house building just seems to be based on get as many in as you can and as quick as you can. You know, it's a strange thing. Like I say, I just look at the stuff that's going on around here, the building work, and the houses are, like you say, straight out the 80s. It's like we've learned nothing. We're just going to tarmac over these great big water sink areas and just leave them as they are. You know, amazing. Anyway, shall we have a go at what you're going to do? Have you presented via Zoom before, Paul?
No, I've only been on chats like this, so I share the screen.
Yeah, have you got, I think I have to give you permission to be able to share screen. So have you got PowerPoint set up there?
Yep.
Right, okay, hold on. I think what I have to do is, who can share? What I'm going to do is make you co-host. Okay. So bear with me a second and we'll see if that works. Make co-host. Right. There we go. So what you should be able to do, Paul, is if you click share screen.
Can you see that?
Yeah, got it. Fantastic. That's it.
Yeah, I've got that as well.
Hello, Ian. You okay?
Yeah, fine, thanks. How are you?
Good. Yeah, all right. Thank you. Have you avoided all the dreaded virus?
Yeah, apart from the virus of being bored rigid.
Yeah, everybody's got it, haven't they?
Yeah, well, being over 70, of course, it just compounds the blooming.
Yeah, of course it does. Oh God, never mind. I tell you what, Paul, could you press play and let's just make sure we can.
Simon.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute myself and kill my video for now.
Okay, all right, no problem. See you in a bit.
All right.
You want us to do the same, Simon?
Hi, Alan and Sue. Hello.
When the talk's going on. Hi.
Doing you okay? Yeah, I tell you what, if you could, that's an idea actually. If you can kill your camera and your sound, Alan, when the talk's going on.
Yeah.
I think, or I mean, you can leave your camera on if you want. I was just thinking about the presenter view.
Yeah, we don't need to be. No.
Yeah, so there might be an idea. That's
Simon.
it. Yeah.
Just a suggestion: get everybody to mute themselves, because otherwise you pick up background noise.
Yeah.
And when we get to asking questions, get them to put their hands up.
Okay, we'll do.
You've got the raise hand if you go at the bottom of the participants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. The reaction.
Explain that to them.
Yeah, will do.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cheers.
thanks, Ian. Thanks, Ian. And I'll mute everybody. What I'll do is I'll mute everybody myself here. So
Yeah, you do them.
yeah,
Mute all. Yeah.
mute. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Ian. Excellent. That looks brilliant. That does.
What time would you like me to straight through and for until no breaks?
Yeah, no breaks, no. So if we do, I usually think sort of 35, 40 minutes
Okay.
is about what I think most people can stay concentrating on Zoom for.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and then if it's all right with you, if we
Yeah.
do, and feel free about running over a bit if you need to.
Yeah.
And if it's all right with you, if we do questions after.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're broadcasting out on YouTube now as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they can join us in both ways and ask questions either through Zoom. We'll see how many come up on Zoom, but most people tend to watch on YouTube and
Okay.
ask questions through that. All right, so it's both ways.
Yeah. I'll just get the dog in then because she will bark.
Go for it. That looks great. I'm going to mute off at this end, Paul, because we've got how many minutes? Another 4 minutes to go. So I'll just mute us both off for a couple of minutes while you get the dog in.
Okay. You're muting me as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll mute you. Good evening, everybody. Hope that you are well. We will be with you in about 3 minutes' time. Good evening, everybody. Don't worry if you can't hear anything. We're all muted off at the moment. So it's good to see you all. Welcome on board. We'll be with you in just a couple of minutes' time. As you can see, Paul is here, ready and waiting to talk to us. So it's 7:29, so we'll give it just another minute and then we'll be with you. That little chime was me. that was Zoom telling me that I've got a Zoom meeting at 7:30 tonight.
I thought that was my intro music.
Yeah. Oh no, we've got an orchestra ready for you, Paul.
Should think so. Should think so.
Warming up in the background. Okay, we'll just give it a couple of minutes, Paul, because we've got more people joining at the moment.
Okay.
So we've got more people coming in on YouTube. There's people as well. Somebody's just joined on Zoom as well. So let's just give it a moment. Just watching this huge area of rain going across Wales and into Eastern Ireland at the moment. We've got thunderstorms breaking out down over the southwest as well. So we're quite lucky at the moment that we've gone dry.
Yeah. Plenty more due, isn't there?
Yeah. There's some more on its way. I think that's the main batch gone through. I was just looking actually at this stuff that's over the south. See if that could come back in tonight. It looks about right where it's forecast, but yeah, we could get more. 50 mil in the last few days, so 2 inches, which is more than we've seen since I think middle of February.
Yeah. Is that more than the monthly average? Monthly, what we'd expect?
We're not. I think for June it's about 60. So with more on the way, I think we're gonna beat it. You know, which is crazy, really, when we think that we had 2 millimeters total in May.
Yeah. Oh well, it was noticeable, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, 2 mil of rain is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I can't remember it being that low before.
Yeah. We certainly needed it though.
Yeah.
Get us through all that.
Yeah.
Nonsense.
The rivers must have suffered. Did they? Were they?
Oh, they did, yeah. Well, the groundwater was pretty high from all the winter flooding we had.
Yeah.
So it was it's coped a lot better than we expected because of all that rain we had.
Right. Okay.
But it certainly challenged it. I mean, our reservoirs were starting to get a little bit worrying.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a similar story that I was hearing from the farmers as well, because the farmers that we were forecasting for were saying that they were starting to get desperate for rain at the end.
Yeah.
But actually, the crops were growing still because the water table was so high.
Yeah.
But then when it stayed dry at the end of May, things were just starting to really suffer.
Yeah, it was getting critical.
Yeah.
I mean, Sedgley Beacon was really suffering. You know, normally in the start of June, it's covered in oxeye daisies.
Yeah.
There's actually large patches that were desiccating and dying.
Really?
And I've never seen it looking so bare. And that's a you know, it's an ancient limestone quarry that's seen lots of weather patterns in the past.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, good old Glastonbury though. That's brought on the rain back, hasn't it?
Yeah, of course it has.
Glastonbury weekend.
Of course it has. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just the mention of it. Okay. Well, we're 7:33 now, and we've got people joining us still through YouTube, but I think we'll get going. Welcome to everybody who's joined us this evening. It's nice to see you. If I can't quite see you, but you know what I mean. It's nice to have you on board. I'm just going to press record, if that's all right, Paul, so that we can record your lovely voice. Yeah, so we're broadcasting on Zoom and we're broadcasting on YouTube as well. So welcome to everybody who's joining us on Zoom and everybody who's joining us on YouTube as well. It's great to see you again. This is the third of our virtual meetings, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Paul Wilkinson back. And you know, Paul's a great friend of the Society from the Canal and River Trust, and we're in for a treat again this evening. Just before we kick off, it'll be the usual format. So what I'm going to do is to introduce Paul in a moment, and then Paul will talk to us for sort of 35-40 minutes or so, and then there'll be questions after that. Now, those of you who join us on Zoom, feel free to ask a question via audio. Trust me, it's not as scary as it sounds. We just unmute you, which I know sounds slightly painful, but it's not. We'll unmute you, and then you can ask a question of Paul. If you're on YouTube, you can put a question in the little chat box, and I'll monitor that, and I can read that out to Paul as well. So we'll do questions once Paul has finished. We had a Society Council meeting last week, and we've got a plan in place that we'll continue to have these virtual talks now through the summer and possibly into the early autumn. Of course, we still don't know when we're going to be meeting face to face. So we're lining up other speakers, and we're really grateful for these speakers who are coming on board at short notice. And Paul is one of those. So we've got other speakers lined up for us through July and August, and also for September as well. And then really it's a case of, I think, just playing it by ear as to when we can get back into the usual routine of meeting each other. Although I suspect from the news that I'm hearing, that may be a fair while off yet. So virtual is the way that we're going to have to do it. And I think we're all getting used to that idea now, aren't we? So it's great for you to join us. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Paul Wilkinson, who Paul is from the Canal and River Trust. And you'll know that Paul has spoken to us in the past. I think you've done probably two talks now, or 3 talks, Paul, to us. Yeah,
At least, yeah.
and every one of them always goes down really well. And I'm really grateful to Paul for stepping in at short notice to give us his talk, A Natural History of the Midland Canals. So, Paul, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Paul Wilkinson. I'm the senior ecologist, and I've been working on the canals for 17 years now. So obviously seen quite a bit of the Midlands canals. And I'd just like to share a little bit of the wonderful diversity. I'm going to skip over subjects quite quickly because I've got at least 80 slides and 45 minutes. And so I've got to cram a few things in. So if you see anything, please ask questions at the end because I will be rushing through. And one of the terrible things we've just been through the last few months, but one of the things that has happened for the Canal and River Trust has been that you have found where your local canals are, and our footfall on the canals has gone through the roof. I think it's doubled or trebled in many areas. Obviously, because we connect so many communities, it's the nearest bit of natural space for them to exercise and get their bit of fresh air. So that's been one of the things that has come out of this. I do have to have a caveat that you are likely to hear my dogs through this. They bark at everything. So please forgive me for that. Right. Obviously, wonderful history to the canals. Started the Industrial Revolution and connected the coal fields to the villages and the cities and very industrial places. First canals in the area, 1769. And they were really contaminated, busy places. And places like the Cannock Extension Canal, which we see as a rural canal now, it's noted that there was a 4-foot tidal wave every day at noon with the amount of traffic that was going up and down it. There'd have also been very little health and safety back in those days, and there would have been all sorts of materials, particularly coal, but all sorts of bulky materials transported, and there'd have been accidents and spillages, and we have that legacy in the silt even today. Obviously, if anyone has ever dug a pond, certainly nothing but credit to the creation of the canals. There were 3,000 miles originally, and now we're down to a third of that. 2,000 miles left, we lost a third, sorry. And incredible, muscle power and pony power and wheelbarrow power, incredible feats, and the engineering that went in was incredible. Something that has to be treasured to this day. This is a map of roughly the area I cover, of the Midlands and the network of canals. And the orange bits are the old bits that are under restorations or lost, and have groups actively working on them as we speak. As you can see, the central area of Birmingham and the Black Country has a real dense network of canals, and there's a real diversity in there, which is one of the best areas in the Midland, in the country for diversity of canals due to that dense network. Not too far away from where we are at the moment, this is the Bentley Canal, or was, and this is Bentley Bridge up in the top right-hand corner. So this is a picture from the 80s, and it shows a wonderful green corridor, and just imagine the wildlife that would have been down there. And obviously not a lot of wildlife on Bentley Bridge. And as you can see, the dense arm and the car park and then the retail. So that's just showing you the change in land use and potentially the loss of an opportunity. Obviously the canal will never be restored again, but just a loss of green space and linear network, especially nowadays when we sort of value so much walking open spaces and green corridors and networks. So something to be learned going forward about, protecting these corridors maybe. This is just down the road from where we are. Well, it's most of us, I imagine. Swindon Lock, where the school would be, and houses. This is from Waterways World, just showing you how quickly the industrial revolution and industrial landscape changes and can be lost and becomes a different purpose. So this industrial landscape has now turned into a very wonderful green space, and its role has changed. There's still a little bit of industry. There's still there are people living on the canal, but obviously it's a lot more about the towpath is becoming very valuable nowadays, not just for horses, for people now. And all that history has left a lot of heritage. All the canals had different landowners, had to cross different land ownership, and the heritage often reflects that. This is just down the road from where we are, Albridge, and this is an ancient scheduled monument. And we have lots and lots of heritage on the canal network. And some of that heritage was constructed using lime mortar. And because lime mortar expands and works with the handmade bricks rather than concrete, which can split them. And one of the consequences of that is that lime-loving plants now colonise the bridges. And in some cases, in some counties, there are very rare plants that only occur on canal bridges, such as rusty back fern and spleenworts. And in the Black Country, ploughman's spikenard occurs on a few bridges in Dudley. And this little one is wallrue. As you can see, totally artificial. Lock gates helping water go uphill and downhill. And in the Midlands, we have well over 1,000 lock gates, which need replacing roughly every 20 years, usually in the winter, and obviously holds a lot of water back. So it is all controlled and artificial, and there's a lot of water lost over particularly the summer when the recreational boating and a lot of boat movement occurs. And we've got lots of trees. I wish that I've got the figure for you. I know how many we have to fell due to safety. But I wished I knew what our number of tree assets was. It will be in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And the link there is that we now have some wonderful oak woodlands along the canal network. And the oaks are obviously what went into the lock beams and still do at the Bradley workshop. We still use UK oak lock beams. And also elm was part of the paddles of the lock gate, which used to be used, but obviously really struggle to find elm nowadays with Dutch elm disease, and you need large, big, mature trees, which would have been very common back in the heydays of the canals, but obviously now very rare to see a mature elm tree. Actually, but the link is that oaks are one of the best, well, they're probably the best tree for wildlife. They have so much biodiversity associated with them, and the number of insects and invertebrates that feed on the leaves is in the hundreds, 400s different species, if not more. And that obviously creates a whole network of biodiversity in itself. And elm, species like the white-lettered hair streak breeds caterpillars feed on the elm leaves. In the Midlands, we have 27 tunnels, and they sometimes keep me busy because obviously they're old heritage and very important places. And sometimes we have bat interest. This one is at Shrewley, and the top tunnel is where the horse would have gone over so this actually goes through the village of Shrewsley to avoid obviously the village of Shrewsbury, and the horse would have gone up over the hill while the boat was legged through the tunnel. One of the main interests of bats in these tunnels is Natterer's bats and Dorbenton's bats, and there's a gap in the lining between the old brickwork and the new brickwork, which they love. We have 30 reservoirs, and all the canals and all the lock gates, every time they're open, need to replenish with water. So obviously in the winter, it's winter storage, and then in the summer, we let the water out to refill it, to keep the canals level. And we have a wonderful diversity of reservoirs around the area that themselves have become very important for wildlife. Many of them very important for overwintering birds and waterfowl. A lot of kilometres of canals, towpaths, as hopefully many of you know, and all very diverse. This is the centre of Birmingham, and we have some very rural, wonderful canals. And really, the wildlife isn't restricted to the rural areas. In some of the urban areas, we have some wonderful old heritage plants that have hung on several hundred years. And in some cases, there is more diversity in some urban areas and post-industrial areas than actually in the rural areas. And there was a study done on pollinators, and actually some of the more brownfield industrial sites have more pollinators than many of the rural ones. And the canals provide that link between the rural and the city, and often provides a corridor through the cities. And one of our charity objectives is to promote and to protect and to encourage and to enhance biodiversity and that natural history. One of the designated ways that shows the importance of our some of our sites is to be designated as the top SSSI, sites of special scientific interest. And we also have special areas of conservation in the area. And as you can see, they're pretty evenly spread over the patch. And this is the Cannock Extension Canal, not too far away, designated and protected because of its water plants. So in the past, many of these plants would have been very common in the landscape. And now, because the canals held on through that period of time and lots of ponds and waterways have been drained or lost, they're now the only example of where these plants occur. And there we have Fens Pools, which used to be the Pensnet Chase, and totally enclosed by housing and industry, and very, very important for nature conservation. The features there are for amphibians and great crested newts. Sorry. Fens Pools feeds the Stourbridge Canal, which feeds into our Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal. Towpaths are wonderful because in many cases they haven't been improved by any fertilizers. They haven't changed in several hundred years, so they contain wonderful plants. This one here is the flowering rush, which again is quite common through the Black Country canals, the quieter canals maybe, and the little lock pounds where there's sheltered areas. This is a plant very worthy of Kew Gardens or Chelsea Flower Show, and this picture is actually taken in Great Bridge. And the Cannock Extension is designated primarily for its floating water plantain, which is this little inconspicuous plant which grows in its millions on the Cannock Extension Canal. Very small flower. You need a lot of them to take a bunch home to your mother. And on the Cannock Extension, we also have, so one of the connections that we're trying to make is that these are wonderful special places, but actually all nature has its wonderful special qualities. And this little plant here is called eyebright, and in the past it was used to treat eye ailments, and it's still being used in medical research. It's got wonderful qualities, particularly associated with eye ailments. Fens Pools Amphibians, a wonderful resource for children and adults alike. One of the things about being connected to urban areas is that we often have urban issues as well, such as introductions of exotic species, plants and animals. This is the alpine newt, which is an exotic from Europe, associated with a disease that affects amphibians, and also we don't know how it competes with native amphibians at the moment, so they're being monitored. Not obviously illegal to introduce non-native species, and very bad idea. We also have people that have introduced the American signal crayfish and the Turkish narrow-claw crayfish in the objective of coming back at a later date so they can harvest them as a food source. And obviously that is very, it's illegal. It's introduced the crayfish plague, which is affecting our native crayfish, and they're also affecting biodiversity in a big way. And the signal crayfish can actually deplete biodiversity to almost a stage where they're having to cannibalize themselves because they've eliminated all the other invertebrates. This is the Anglesey Branch Canal, one of my favourites, up near Chasewater. And the reason why this is wonderful is that we've got slightly alkaline water with alkaline species, but this is very much dry, acidic heathland. And we've got the dry heath and the wet heath. And it's a good example of where lowland heathlands meet the northern heathlands, and right mixture of species, including tubular water dropwort. And this little gem here. So the Canal River Trust have a wellbeing focus, and linking nature is very much about well-being, and also what we eat and some of the benefits and the antioxidants that we get from food. And this little berry here that you can see is this is wild cranberry, and it's a very rare plant, and we have to protect this. I can't tell you exactly where it is because it is not enough for everybody's Christmas dinner by any means. But what we should be working for conservation is to make sure that there is lots and lots of these plants so that people can know where they are. And we can put lots of, you might not be able to collect cranberries, but you might be able to collect some fruit from somewhere else, because obviously there's lots of health benefits from doing that. This is the little sundew. This one's the Anglesey branch. This one's designated for its pondweeds and also its water voles. And as you can see, this is actually the towpath behind those meadow sweet flowers. Meadow sweets, obviously medicinal and edible flowers as well. And one of the reasons the water voles has held on is because of the lush habitat on both sides of the canal. Yeah, so pondweeds, not very studied widely, not on everybody's list of natural history books, but these are the Potamogetans that are the proper native pondweeds that we have, and obviously quite rare nowadays, and sometimes quite difficult to identify. Talking of the white claw crayfish, there used to be huge populations on the canals. Even 17 years ago, there were jobs where we used to do fish rescues and crayfish rescues and just move them when we were doing the lock stoppages, and they would take several hundred crayfish from a very short pound of canal. And they have pretty much all been lost on the canal network. A few years back with the University of Derbyshire and Sea Life Centre, we had a funded project which did environmental DNA of the canal network. So we were collecting samples of water, and Chris there was sampling it for environmental DNA of crayfish. So actually all the DNA of every living creature that swum through that section of canal could be tested for its DNA. And one of the wonderful things about environmental DNA is that it's 100% proof, confirmed record. And it came back quite badly for us, because all the white claw crayfish locations, apart from a few isolated reservoirs, have now disappeared, and they've been replaced by the signal crayfish, which has not only spread its disease, but it also outcompetes because it's a bigger, stronger crayfish. This is I've got lots of terrible video footage on my phone, which I like to share, as some of you might know. That is just showing a little white claw crayfish at a site not too far away from where we are. And these are now very, very important sites of our last few populations. And some of the canals are also designated of importance for its geology. So when the canal was cut through, this used to be a tunnel and it collapsed, and this is at Shrewley. And it's exposed some wonderful geology that you wouldn't normally be able to interpret because it would be under the ground. And these are very wonderful sites. And obviously with the geology, there's some wonderful flora as well. And not just the designated things, but we've still got some very important natural heritage going on right in Sandwell and Birmingham, and on the offside of the canal we've got some last remnants of the Birmingham Heath and bilberries and cowberries, and we're trying desperately to protect the last remaining bits and to actually encourage them on large landscape projects. So we're working with the local community, and we've been collecting seed and spreading it in various areas, and we've already had success. So I want to turn Galton Valley absolutely pink in the end of the summer with heather in a few years' time. So again, with the natural heritage, our water voles from archaeological evidence have been with us since the last ice age, so when we were separated from Europe. They again were very common on the canal network, to the point that in the early days of the canal network, they actually employed water vole pest controllers to stop them with a worry of them damaging the canal banks. Obviously now very, very rare and protected, and lots of conservation effort going in for them. One of the things that we've been working with is the Wildside Activity Centre and Wildlife Trust, where we've been funding coir roll projects, and this is just in section of Wolverhampton going up towards the I-54, and George Rees has been sending us in pictures of evidence that it's been working. These are the water voles up in Wolverhampton. And what we've been, that coir roll there that was being unloaded, you can see on the offside of the canal. And sorry about that. This is the old trench sheet, the engineers' trench sheet piling. Very good for engineers, but not great for wildlife. So we've been putting the coir rolls in front of the piling, and that habitat was just a few months after instalment, and it goes from strength to strength, to the point that you wouldn't even know it was an artificial bank if you walked along that section now. And lots of research has proven that coir rolls are really good for water voles. Some of the other well-being benefits for us are being next to water, are actually, it's a very clean environment to walk in. So this is Smethwick High Street, and this is Galton Valley, just the other side. The two canals, the old main line and the new main line. And one of the benefits is actually, these are quite heavily polluted environments nowadays, as we're all aware, and cycling and walking, trying to do our bit, you know, can be quite harmful to our health in certain environments and certain occasions. So actually walking the canal towpath, this vegetation is actually blocking a lot of that pollutants. And so actually we believe that these sections of canal are actually quite nice, clean air environments to exercise and to commute in, and to cycle and to live and to boat. And that research there, up to 60% reduction from vegetation, that was simply silver birch trees in pots placed outside houses in front of a very busy road. And so we believe that a dense section of habitat and trees would probably be up to 90% or more. And also, a lot of the health benefits are often hidden. So we might, some people might be happy to see wildflowers, but actually this little plant here, Scutellaria skullcap, I found some evidence that actually this family of plants is being tested in its research against COVID because it has inflammatory qualities and its medicinal qualities that might be help. So these plants might not cure things, but they certainly all build up to health benefits. And they'll often have hidden health benefits, which is why we need to protect them before we lose these plants, before we even understand what they might be able to cure or help us with. Towpaths, this is on the Tyne Valley Canal, just up from Great Bar, and obviously we've got the bee orchids in there, and I know that the bee orchids and the certain types of plants have been there since the 80s, recorded in the 80s, and getting the towpath cutting is very important to us and something that is very difficult to get right. Obviously these towpaths have to be cut. We can't just let them scrub up, and obviously the diversity would be lost if we didn't cut them. And we've got so many kilometres of canals. It's understanding where the important bits are and applying the right sort of towpath cut into them. Very, very good for pollinators. And this was taken a couple of weeks ago. This is just down the road from us in Kidderminster. And again, the humble oxeye daisy is, we talk about orchids and we get excited about rare plants, but this common plant is one of the best for pollinators and wildlife. And a small patch is absolutely amazing at bringing wildlife in. And it's obviously, it does it by itself if you just leave a verge uncut. But it does like to seed into the mown areas, so you can't just walk away from mowing. These flowers like to seed into short areas, and then the following year they'll flower. And some of our industrial sites are very interesting as well, where we've had housing maybe 100 years ago, 200 years ago. You know, for some health and safety reason, a building might need to be pulled down and it's piled in a corner, and some wonderful things happen from native plants and plants that might have been in the gardens a couple of 100 years ago or 100 years ago. For instance, here we've got Italian toadflax, and we've got Erin's rod or mullein, and we've got snapdragons and valerian and all sorts of things going on amongst native plants like poppies and corn marigolds and ragworts. And there is wild rocket as well here, which is obviously edible and a very nice plant. And maybe a little glimpse of when this centre of Birmingham was a little bit more rural and would have had agriculture right on its doorstep. We also have opium poppies, which are obviously from very modern somebody's garden. So taking all that wonderful triple SIs and the industrial brownfields and people's gardens and rewilding, and we've brought that right into the heart of the middle of Birmingham, because obviously this was known as a little bit of a barrier for a lot of wildlife. Wonderful place to work and shop and live, but obviously very harsh for wildlife to move through. So we set up a project to bring habitats into the city centre, and that was purposefully for the benefit of people, because if we work on making things right for people, then the pollinators and the wildlife will actually benefit as well. So that it was very much focused on fruit trees and old cottage gardens and mixing in native plants as well, but making it look good. So as all the people that wouldn't go to a nature reserve might actually stop and look and learn and might ask questions, and then might be more interested in nature conservation. And we're using moths as well as indicators, because they are wonderful bioindicators. And so far, from setting moth traps up in the city centre, it's showing how sort of deprived the habitats are in the city centre. So we actually found 3 species of moth and about 8 individual moths in several sessions of moth trapping. Now, if anybody that's done moth trapping and you set it up in your garden, you'll know that that's very, very poor. You normally get hundreds of moths in a moth trap overnight. And moths feed on vegetation, all different types of plants, and the less plants you have, the less moths you have, and the less moths you have, obviously the less birds and bats and the whole ecosystem. And this little moth in the left-hand corner is the pepper moth, and this is a wonderful little link to heritage in the fact that in the past it was peppered to camouflage on trees with lichen, and in the Industrial Revolution it morphed into a black version to camouflage against soot and pollution. And now it's reverting back to the peppered, and you get them both together. And actually this picture was taken over Kimber Edge because that's where we saw the two together. Some of the links with the plants are, these are the qualities that I'll get the group, the volunteers, to choose what they'd like. And these are the criteria: ideally edible, medicinal, a link to the history, definitely good for pollinators and biodiversity gain, sensory, so people, you know, with not just visually, but smell, touch. We really don't want to discriminate against anybody. So we want to bring in as many people as we can, and to enlighten as many senses as we can, because obviously that's very good for well-being as well. And as you can see, that's what we put the table against. And obviously certain plants like feverfew, which you normally wouldn't plant in a city centre, qualifies for lots of those. And obviously the name feverfew hints to its properties of what it's used for. And I know that it has been used by some people to treat migraines and headaches. And roses as well, obviously very, very good for people and wildlife. Some of the things that the research of the volunteers found quite interesting was how good boring old sage is. And we don't include sages a lot in our diets anymore, but we should, because it has all these hidden benefits, including some that we're researching as we speak, such as the baldness one. And salvias and sages are wonderful for pollinators. Bees love them. And this picture was taken in November, and it just shows you how the urban heat effect carries on, protects from frosts, and there's a much longer flowering period in places like the middle of Birmingham. And we're also not restricted to plants just from the UK. This is echinacea from North America, but anyone that grows echinacea knows it's great for bees and butterflies, and it's medicinal, and you can take echinacea. It's said to be, good for immunity and fighting off colds and things like that. Also working with the water to improve the water quality. Plants are fantastic at absorbing even things like oil, holding them and breaking them down and making them safe. So we definitely wanted to put more natural habitats into the centre of Birmingham. Also for little places, little pockets for species to be able to get through the city centre. And this is the result, a wonderful waterway fringe and full of damselflies now, which didn't used to breed in the city centre. And also that wonderful invertebrates and damselflies and improved water quality is fantastic for fish. Isn't that beautiful, like an aquarium? This is actually Wolverhampton toplock, but obviously another very industrial legacy and past. Just showing you how good the ecosystem is nowadays. We also unfortunately have some exotics in the canal network. This is the Wells catfish, huge appetite and big impact on the environment. There was a documentary in France that showed that once they'd eaten all the fish in the river, they then turned on the pigeons that came down to bathe and pretended to be logs and floated up next to them. So obviously a big concern that these are in the canal network. This was a fish rescue that we did and these turned up. And that was the other one that was found, and that's still got some growing to do as well. And my friend Dave Martin sent me these in as well. Wonderful pictures of Lodge Farm Reservoir next to the Dudley Canal. Wonderful pictures. And all those fish, an improved ecosystem. Has meant that the otter is now back through our area after a huge decline, catastrophic decline with DDT and persecution, but now has reached most of its former strongholds and is actually back on the canal network. This picture was taken on the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal, again not too far away from where we are down at Kimber. And we've been running surveys now for 3 years with volunteers. Every year they go out and survey a section of canal and looking for the signs of otter. And if they find any signs, they send us a sample of the otter sprains, just a small piece. And then we test it for DNA to see whether it's definitely an otter and see if it's a male or a female. And sometimes we can even try and see if it's an individual. And from that, we've got this result. Now, we haven't done the whole of the Midlands because it's such a huge area, and we can get a lot of volunteers where there's a lot of people. So sometimes the rural areas miss out on this survey a little bit, but it's purposefully that we do want to see how the urban areas are doing. These are indicators of how well the canal's ecosystem is. As you can see, there's the green is the female otter, the orange is the male, and the black is the either wasn't, we couldn't determine the DNA, or it came back as a survey after we'd sent the DNA off. And so as you can see, they have made it into the centre of Birmingham. The Staffordshire and Worcester is a stronghold, and it has been for several decades now. Down on the Stratford Canals and the Grand Unions and the Tyne Valley and the Birmingham and Fazeley Canal, still a void in this Birmingham and Black Country area. And that's possibly maybe to do with lots of research and university students looking at this, possibly down to the fact that there's a lot of peripheral habitats in these areas, whereas when we get into the urban Black Country, the canal is literally the only linear feature, and there's not these brooks and rivers and ponds that they need to diversify their diets, maybe. Or maybe it's to do with pollution, with the one-off pollutants. So as every so often these urban areas might have a pollution incident. Still lots to be done, and obviously this is now targeting work of these wonderful canals up here, and how we can maybe get the otters through here. We're also looking at microplastic and whether that's in their diet. We know that microplastic is, these are samples taken in Birmingham, and these pictures are of microplastic, and we fully expect that it's in their diet as well, and we don't know how that will affect them. Wonderful engagement with volunteers. Couldn't get any of it done without this wonderful volunteers. Mixing lots of natives with introduced and non-native and variety plants, sorry. And as long as the bees and people like it, then it all fits in. Here we sort of went with a cornfields theme, so the corn poppies and the apricots, and this has worked very well because it's very low maintenance. And again, here's the peach orchard, and we're actually training these pear trees to form living barriers. And this cornfield and corn marigolds and chamomile, they never stop flaring, and they were actually flaring through the winter. And it defies what we normally know about cornfields. Very, very wonderful, and very proud of the volunteers' work here. Like I say, a big audience are seeing what we're doing, so we can, without even them having to travel to a nature reserve, they're working or commuting or on the lunch breaks, they can see what's going on, and we can try and connect with them that way. And the more exotic, the better. We want to stop people. We want people to ask questions, and even passion flowers, which are again medicinal from South America. The bees are happy, so I'm happy. And we're planting the plants that are deliberately attacked by insects because we want to increase the biomass of insects. So, you know, things like mullein, which gets the mullein moth, and lots of other species of plants, even kale and cabbages, because we have to grow the organic seeded ones, because often now the seed is impregnated with pesticides from as soon as it germinates. So you won't get the pest caterpillars on it, and we really do want those pest caterpillars because we want to rebuild the biodiversity, especially important for species like black redstart, which are in decline in the area, and nasturtiums, which are edible for people, and white butterflies as well. So we've got to talk about it. So we're using these signs just to inform people, get people asking questions. People are always asking what plants are growing, getting ideas, and we're trying to give them information. And that has actually led on to the group creating the Great Canal Orchard. So we're going to create the longest canal orchard, well, the longest orchard in the country. It all starts off by the fact that we've already got some wonderful trees and some wonderful old heritage trees along the canal. The canals do have a connection with fruit trees, particularly damsons and perry pears and things that would have been associated with lock cottages. So people would have made preserves to get them through the winter, and jams. Also, we want them to represent the community they pass through, so that each community will decide what trees they want to grow. And also, as long as there's a core group of traditional orchard trees, we're also putting exotics in there, and even things like pomegranates and grapes and things like that are not off the list at all. And we do want that link. Green gages and damsons and medlars, a very old variety that's quite rare now. And this pear tree at Galton Valley might actually be a unique, very rare tree. Some of the Perry pears in the Midlands are actually some of the rarest trees in the world. And this one is actually quite a nice eater, but it's very small and very hard. And it's very tasty. And we call it the Galton pear at the moment. And so we're propagating it, and we want to get it tested with DNA to see whether or not it's a variety or whether it's a unique special pear that's been lost to history. And the Tetnal Dick one Tetnal Dick pear is a tree from the area as well. And that is a very rare tree that we've been propagating as well to put along into the canal orchards. And the orchards are obviously connected to people and wonderful for people, a natural resource of food, which fibre and fruit, which we need more of, but also brilliant for wildlife. And fruit trees have an incredible biomass of insects and invertebrates, and they're obviously connected to species of bat, which love orchards as well. And the insects that are generated, that is an eyed hawk moth, which will turn into a lovely juicy protein package for a bat. And also birds need the insects to feed the young, and they'll also need the fruit to get them through the winter. And right now, look out for honeysuckle and dog rose. Again, dog rose is a little bit underplayed. It's a wonderful plant for wildlife, and in the past we would have collected the rose hips to make rose hip syrup, and people were actually paid during the war to collect rose hips because of the high vitamin C content and the helping get us boost our immunity through colds and flu. At the moment, we're just getting the scarlet tiger moths coming through, and actually they do breed along the canals. And when I was a child, this moth was restricted to the southwest, and it's actually colonised along the waterways. And that caterpillar there was down just outside Kidderminster, and I've since found them on comfrey near Kimber. So this comfrey, an introduced plant in itself, escaped from gardens, wonderful for bees, and actually now proving very valuable to get this beautiful day-flying moth along the network. Have a look for glowworms. We do get them on a canal network. They're very rare. We know there's glowworms in the South Staffordshire, but we don't know if they're on the canal. So if you're walking, do keep an eye out for a lovely little faint glow. Canals are very important for toad populations. Huge declines in toads, but they're actually doing okay on certain sections of canal. Look at the moment for dark black tadpoles swarming like this. They're distasteful to fish, so they swim around free from persecution, and they actually like the canals because of the fish. And they're just getting the back legs and starting to turn into little toadlets. Getting a few reports of grass snakes around the area as well. So please treat them with respect and give them a bit of space. They're harmless and wonderful parts of our natural heritage. This is hay rattle. So I mentioned earlier about our towpath management and how sometimes we don't get it right and sometimes we do. And so this summer, we're going to be using a lot of hay rattle seed because this is parasitic on grass. So it reduces the grass growth. And we're hoping that certain sections of towpath, we can use this as a grassland management. So we're going to be doing that the next few months. Keep an eye out for this invasive, Azolla, highly invasive, one of the fastest growing plants in the world. We're having quite a bad problem on certain parts of the canal network, particularly around Walsall and Sandwell at the moment, possibly due to the very mild winter we've had. Cold winters get this plant back in check. In the winter it's red and in the summer it's green. floats on the surface of the water. And what we've been doing recently is releasing weevils. So these little fellas here, I don't know if you can spot the weevils. There's a picture of the larva and there's a picture of 2 weevils mating. Sorry, it's before the watershed. Have you spotted them yet? There's the weevils mating and there's the larva. So these are incredible at controlling azolla. They only eat azolla, and all the brown fronds up here are the larvae which have got into the root system and started attacking the plant from the inside, and they can control an outbreak of azolla within a couple of months. Really wonderful biological control. Also, just as a hazard, look out for giant hogweed. Occurs along rivers, not so much along canals, and where we see it, we treat it and control it. One of the problems with giant hogweed is its sap. So in warm weather, if you brush against it and you get a certain reaction with sunlight, it can cause severe blisters. So if you do see this plant, please report it, and we'll treat it straight away, especially if it's near a towpath like this. Originally from Eastern Europe. Remember, it was once an ornamental plant, so it's just under certain situations that it can actually cause problems, but we can't take that risk. We have to treat this plant straight away. And don't confuse it with common hogweed, which can get to 6 feet as well. Common hogweed is a very good wildlife plant and doesn't have the same harmful properties. Another project that we'll be working on is the Lesser Horseshoe project. So we're trying to find funding to help this little bat through the landscape. So this is one of the most northern areas of this species. Just like the otter was restricted to the southwest. And again, just like the otter, we believe is using the canal network and waterways to reclaim some of its lost territories. And it doesn't like disturbance, so it's trying to find places to tuck away and hide away. And South Staffordshire has got quite an important population to get them through to the north. And little projects like Devil's Den, where we put a canal door on it, has actually helped them, little satellite roosts, getting them through the landscape. And the next step is to turn maybe some of our old buildings, such as pump houses, into actual, restore them for the heritage and actually give them space to roost as well. Thank you very much. Sorry, I've gone over a little bit. I'll finish the talk there now, and if we like to ask any questions, sorry I've gone over, but that's not too bad for me. I normally go a couple of hours over, so it's not too bad.
Hey, Paul, that was excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, wonderful as always. Fascinating. So much information there, and you could have gone on. That was brilliant. Thank you very much. Now we're about, I think YouTube runs about sort of 30-40 seconds behind. So anybody got any questions, please do ask them for Paul. I've got one for you, Paul. Sage, baldness, where can I get a job lost?
It's sage seems like a real super plant and something that seems, it went out of fashion a little bit. So sage and onion stuffing used to be quite common. Yeah. But you know, just you can grow sage in all its varieties. The supermarkets are actually a very cheap way of getting potted sage.
Yeah.
And just put it in your diet, you know, just every evening grab a few leaves. And if it doesn't cure baldness, it might cure something else.
Exactly. It's got to be worth a try, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's always worth a try.
Absolutely.
Yeah, full of good minerals. So one of the things that we learned with the wild in Birmingham is that we just don't include a lot of diversity in our diets anymore. So in the past, we'd have had seasonal and we'd have grown things, and you'd have literally only had a choice of certain plants through the year. So you'd have actually changed your diet through the year, and all these things are building up and helping us. Whereas now we've you know, we can have the same diet, and we can go to the supermarket and get the same shopping all the way through the year, and we don't have that diversity anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Something we've lost, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Linda said she saw weight loss on the sage thing, so yeah, she's happy as well. I've got a question here. Now I don't know who Dell is. Somebody's shown up on Zoom as Dell, so type your name in because I'm not sure who you are, but asking, could the otter control signal crayfish and the introduced catfish?
Yes, definitely. Otters love crayfish, and where the crayfish occur, they occur in high densities. So the otter will obviously exploit that food resource. The one thing about otters is that they have huge territories, and so it's a good thing and a bad thing. So they won't eliminate the crayfish, because what they do is they take a bit and then move on. And we know this when we were video trapping that otter. So that was actually in a lock cottage garden, and the person was actually kept restocking it with fish. And no matter how many fish were in there, the otter would never take all the fish, and it wouldn't return for about 13, 14, 15 days a time. So it was obviously traveling. And one of the reasons it does that is to make sure it has a very high resource to attract a mate. So as if it's got lots of wildlife, lots of fish, lots of crayfish, lots of amphibians, then it's likely to attract a female into that territory and mate. Whereas if it's depleted everything, then a female won't even enter that territory. So it will help control, but it won't eliminate. And some of the catfish will probably give it a good fight for its money, to be honest.
Really?
Well, yeah. No, otters are very, very capable predators.
Mind you, those catfish were huge.
Yes, and they can grow. I think over time they could probably reach 5-6 feet as well. So they're formidable predators.
Yeah, absolutely. Now Ian's got a question, so I'm just going to Ian's unmuted, and yeah, fire away, Ian. Ian's got a question for Paul.
Right. I've got quite a few friends who have wildlife areas in their gardens, and one of the plants that they find very valuable as a food plant for the invertebrates is actually alkanet. And I just wondered if that's one of the plants that you use, Paul.
We haven't yet, but I agree with you. It is a wonderful, wonderful plant, especially for bees early on in the year. It's actually spread quite a lot. It's an introduced plant from cottage gardens. I believe it's European. It's actually quite common along the canals now, and it's spread, and it's quite welcome as well. It's one of those introduced plants that actually provides a benefit. But we'll certainly look into the properties of that, because obviously alkanet's interesting in the very name. You know, what medicinal properties would it have? Yeah, there's so many plants. I think there's about 200,000 plants in medical research at the moment, or more. So it's just, yeah, we'll look into that. One funny enough, I've obviously in the lockdown I've been growing as much as I can, and I've been growing kale and cabbages. And some of the best plants for bees and pollinators are actually cabbages and kale when they flower.
Wow.
So you're not only getting the edible food, but actually there are really good plants for pollinators, which you don't think of vegetables. You think flowers or vegetables, one or the other. But yeah, especially the purple kale, because it looks stunning. And when it flowers with the yellow flowers, it's as ornamental as any flower.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah, didn't realise that, Paul. Alan says that Alan and Sue say that alkanet also supports the tiger moth colonies, even more than comfrey.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much for that.
That's a useful one.
Yes.
Linda's asking, have otters been seen in this area?
Yes. They've been on the Staffordshire and Worcestershire for 20 years now. The numbers, what we're finding is the numbers, the territories fluctuate, and we don't know whether that's due to them being killed by road casualties or persecution, or whether it's moving with food resources. So in the 4th year, we're finding that the territories are slightly different, you know, maybe a kilometre apart. They're not always fixed. And they do get run over. You know, we have more casualties found on roads, which sometimes is seen as a positive thing, in the fact that their numbers are quite high and they're exploring new areas. So they're getting more casualties because they're being pushed out of areas where there's already otters.
Yeah.
So as terrible as it is to find one, it's actually like the polecats. you can only record polecats really by road casualties, and that's seen the increase of them across the Midlands and the canal network as well. We think we've seen evidence that they use the canal network as well as a corridor.
So bad news for the individual otter, but good news overall that there's enough of them to get run over, if that makes.
Yeah, it's possibly a sign that it's otters are very territorial. They will, and one of the biggest controls on otter populations are otters themselves. So there's a lot of violence. Most otters taken into rescue centres have got really bad wounds from other otters, and so it might be that they're just, this year's youngsters, last year's youngsters, trying to find new territories, and obviously the roads are so busy nowadays.
Yeah, am I right that I've got somewhere in my head that in Wombourne otters were seen down at the sewage works down at Smestow, and close to the canal there as well at some point? Was that might have been a couple of 3 years ago now, but I think
Wouldn't be surprised. Yeah,
I'm right.
I've only seen 4 otters in the Midlands, and one of them was down at Stewpony.
Yeah,
I was doing a bat survey, and there was an otter on the towpath there, and there was also a noise that I believe there was a female otter in the area as well, from the alarm that was called.
Yeah, so there are perhaps around along Snaffs and Worcester. Yeah.
Oh, they're around. Yeah.
Okay. Got some more questions for you here. Tim says that the Braidley arm is often a blue hue, especially in the summer. What is this, and how does it affect diversity? And then says, how will the potential reopening of the connection between the Walsall/Main Canal change things?
So that wonderful blue hue that you often see on the train as you go past is from the Braidley. The top of Braidley has got pumps. So as well as reservoirs, we have pumps. And because it's coming from groundwater, it's full of minerals. So it's a certain type of mineral that colours it that blue colour. And the Braidley arm is actually absolutely rich in pond plants and fish and invertebrates, and particularly high population of smooth newts. So it's obviously not a harmful chemical. So it's literally the base minerals from the ground pumping. And the connection will probably be a very good thing, because it will connect the Walsall Canal as a corridor through a series of locks, and it will increase the amount of habitat as well. So real opportunity to get something positive there.
Yeah, good. Julian Cartwright says, good evening. We frequently come across otter spraying on our walks along the Stapson Water Canal in the Smestow Valley. Should we be reporting this to anyone?
Yes, well, we do our surveys in February because it's a great time to find otter sprains. It's also a time when there's not a lot of other wildlife surveys going on. Also, people maybe have overindulged over Christmas and might want to go walk in a bit of canal. So it's a great opportunity. But what we wanted to this year, we wanted to scale up that and do a summer survey as well, because we wanted to see how much the territories moved in the summer. So, for instance, when I survey the Staffs and Worcester, I've noticed that areas that are very prominent in the winter with sprains, sometimes those sprains will disappear altogether in the summer. So we want to see where they're going to. So the more information, the better, especially if they're walking the same section, maybe to make a note every month of the sprain. And often you can tell how long it's been there. We should. I hope people have eaten. We won't go into too much detail about the sprain qualities, but you can tell if it's recent or if it's several weeks old. So there's a lot of information that can be gained from that, especially if you're walking regularly. You can then pick up how fresh the sprains are.
Excellent.
Not literally pick up.
Yeah. Okay. How big are they? I'm interested now, Paul. How big is otter poo?
It varies, and it varies on how mature and successful the otter is. So a successful otter will have a large territory, and you might not even notice the sprain. It will just be a scent mark. Whereas an immature might do a sort of cigar shaped. Yeah. So it varies, and sometimes you get a huge pile. I've seen on the Staffordshire and Worcestershire, it was piled and piled and piled up on one of the coping stones.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Julian says as well, and says and terrapins as well. That was Julian who was referring. No, it wasn't. It was Tim. Sorry, Tim, who says and terrapins. Who was referring to the Brady arm, and I guess the clear water that you were talking about. You know, with the minerals in there. That there are terrapins in there as well.
Yeah, we've had quite a few reports of terrapins around as well, on the Stourbridge Canal, Staffs and Worcestershire Canal. They're long-lived animals. They're obviously, people buy them as little pets and don't realise that they can live up to 30, 40 years. Release them into the wild thinking they're doing the right thing, or they might have escaped as well. Generally, they're individuals, so we're not concerned about them because I actually rescued one several years ago from a lock restoration down on the Droitwich Canal, and I rehomed it, and then that person had ill health and asked me to take it back, so I dug a pond for it, and I did a little bit of a study on it, and actually it didn't affect wildlife at all. The sparrows used to bath on top of it. The frogs, it would actually help because he ate some of the tadpoles, but he could never catch most of them, and so the tadpoles actually turned out bigger and stronger than the wildlife pond tadpoles did. It didn't eat the newts because they were nocturnal, and so they're not great hunters, and they're not going to do any more damage than maybe a similar sized carp would. So we're not really concerned. The only concern would be if in the future it gets warmer and they can actually start breeding. But they're not. The red-eared terrapin is now banned from sale, so the numbers shouldn't really get any higher than they already are.
So I guess it's a case of you just monitoring them.
Yeah, and also people enjoy it. You know, it's unusual. I've tried catching one years ago, and it's impossible. So
really,
and they're not going to do any harm. So it's not. Please don't release them. But where they are, maybe just let them have the retirement in peace.
It sounds like a good plan, doesn't it? Yeah, it's what we all want. Anybody got any other questions for Paul? Please do put them in the chat window on YouTube, and I'll put them to Paul. I've got one for you here, Paul. Just thinking that one of the pictures you showed, I'm not sure whether it was close to the Chance Brothers works, which of course they're being redone, aren't they? They've been done up and used as a leisure facility. I wondered if there's any plans for you to do any work along that stretch of the canal by the Chance Brothers.
Chance's Glassworks.
That area, yeah, Chance's Glassworks.
Yeah, we've got a big project which is obviously just coming back into after being on hold, called Revolution Walk. So that goes from Chance's Glasshouse all the way into the Roundhouse in central Birmingham.
Right. So
there's a whole load of funding allocated to that whole corridor for built and natural heritage.
Excellent.
It's a wonderful area.
Yeah, because that's such a big project, and I think if that comes off as it's planned to, that's going to make such a change to a globally, historically important area, isn't it?
Yes, and also that canal was relatively unused considering the population that actually live right on top of it. So it's getting those communities to actually find out, you know, what's so wonderful. And you know, Galton Bridge, you know, it almost looks like Iron Bridge. You know, it's you don't have to travel to Shropshire to see something really important.
Yeah, to stunning areas. And I've been reading in the Black Countryman magazine. You know, there seems to be this awakening of industrial archaeology, and we're suddenly taking a step back and appreciating what's around us even more. You know, in some of the what's been traditionally viewed as some of the uglier landscapes, suddenly we're taking a step back, seeing it, and thinking, actually, it's not that ugly after all. In its own way, a lot of this stuff is just beautiful.
Yeah,
you know. Brilliant. Listen, Paul, thank you so much for your time this evening. It's always a pleasure to have you along. And as I say, you know, you stood in at short notice for us and gave us your talk, your insights, and your knowledge into the canal network of the Midlands and the natural history there. I've learned a lot this evening. I'm sure that the members of the society and the visitors who've been watching us on YouTube have learned lots too. So listen, thank you so much for your time. Will you come back and talk to us again at some point?
Of course.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Paul. Please
thank you very much.
Continue your work. Stay healthy, and hopefully you can get back up to full speed with the volunteers and with the work that you do very, very soon when the world returns to something like normal. So thank you so much for that this evening. And thank you everybody for watching as well. I hope that you've enjoyed yourself over the last hour and 10 minutes or so. As I say, always great to have Paul talk to us. We always learn so much from Paul, and it'll be great to see him at some point in the flesh again, won't it, at one of our meetings. We look forward to that. So our next meeting, I think, is Thursday the 16th of July, if I'm correct. I'm just going to have to check my diary. And Paul, it'd be lovely to see you virtually on that one, if you want to join in and listen this time instead of doing work.
Yeah, pleasure.
So that's the 16th of July. I'm just in the process of confirming the speaker for the 16th of July, but put that in your diaries. And what I'll do is send an email out to members and let you know the time and the Zoom address for that, so you can join us by Zoom if you'd like to. And I'll also put on there the YouTube address as well. If you are watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet, could you click the subscribe button for us? It's actually quite important, because if we can get over a certain number of subscribers, that means that we get a much more friendly YouTube address than the series of numbers and letters that you see at the moment. So please do click on subscribe on there. So I think that's just about it. Thank you again to Paul. Thank you all for watching this evening. And whatever you're doing, stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you very, very soon. Thanks again, and good night all.
Stay safe.